Princes were forced to jump down, abandoning their vehicle, as Duryodhana stood victorious. But battered, he quickly ascended another chariot and rode off towards Arjuna, ready for the next phase of battle. The outcome was far from certain, as the great warriors clashed in a maelstrom of steel and fury. But one thing was clear: this was no ordinary game with dissource stakes to be won or lost. This was war. The sun was setting over the battlefield of Kurukshetra, casting a golden glow over the assembled warriors. Sanjaya, the charioteer and narrator, stood before Dhritarashtra, the blind king, recounting the tale of Bhima and Karna's epic. Duelists, the two combatants, clashed their cars, thundered across the field, leaving behind a trail of dust and destruction. The air was filled with the scent of sweat and blood as they exchanged blow for blow. Sanjaya described how Bhimasena, the mighty son of Pandu, had once before vanquished Karna in battle, and yet here he was again facing off against his arch-nemesis. Dhritarashtra's curiosity got the better of him, and he asked Sanjaya to recount the tale in detail. How could Bhima fight with Karna, that foremost of warriors? He asked, his voice laced with concern. Karna is a mighty warrior, reckoned as the greatest on earth. He has been favored by knowledge, and is skilled in every weapon. How did Bhima manage to hold his own against such a formidable foe? Sanjaya began to weave his tale, describing how Karna had rushed towards Bhimasena, covering him with dense showers of arrows like a cloud pouring rain upon a mountain. The Sudha sun, his face aglow with a smile, challenged Bhima to battle, taunting him for showing his back in fear of Arjuna. Bhimasena, however, was not one to be intimidated. He wheeled his car and began to fight Karna, showering clouds of straight shafts at the Sudha sun. The two warriors clashed, their arrows flying through the air like a deadly dance. Bhima, determined to slay Karna, weakened him with his showers of fire shafts. Karna, however, was no ordinary warrior. He swallowed Bhima's arrows like a hungry elephant devouring its prey. Sanjaya described how Karna began to carry like a preceptor his movements, swift and deadly, as he shot arrow after arrow at Bhimasena. Battle raged on, with both warriors exchanging blows in a blur of steel and blood. Bhima pierced Karna's armor with 73 arrows, but the Sudha sun retaliated by covering Bhima's car with a network of shafts. As the duel continued, Bhima's body became a canvas of wounds, his limbs bathed in blood as he fought on with unyielding ferocity. Sanjaya described how Bhimasena looked resplendent like an Asuka tree in spring, its flowers blooming amidst its verdant leaves. And the end, it was Bhima who emerged victorious, his 25 long shafts piercing Karna's armor like a hot knife through what of the Sudha sun looked like a white. The sun beat down on the battlefield as Duryodhana watched his hopes for victory dwindle with Karna's departure. What did Duryodhana say when he saw that Karna turning away from the field? Dhritarashtra asked Sanjaya, his voice laced with concern. Sanjaya recounted the events of the battle. Mounting upon another car, Karna once more proceeded against Bhimasena with the fury of the Asin tossed by the tempest. The king's sons regarded Bhima as already doomed, like a libation poured into a raging fire, with furious twines of bow strings and terrible sounds of palms. Karna shot dense showers of shafts towards Bhimasena's car. The encounter between Karna and Bhima was fierce. Both warriors, excited with wrath, their eyes red in rage, breathing fire like a couple of snakes, they clashed, each determined to slay the other, their heroism on full display. As they mangled each other, the field of battle became awful like the domain of Bhima. As great car warriors trembled with fear, Bhima, remembering all the woes he had suffered since his childhood, the match at this exile in the woods and residence in Vairata's city, became reckless of his life. He rushed against Karna, shooting dense showers of bright arrows, wetted on stone, shrouding the very light of the sun. At higher, the sun, however, smiled as he quickly baffled that arrowy downpour with his own winged arrows. Karna pierced Bhima with 9 keen arrows like an elephant struck with a hook. Vrikadara fearlessly rushed against the Sudha sun, but Karna rushed against him with great impetuosity and might, like an infuriated elephant against a compeer. The two warriors clashed their force, agitating each other, their steeds mingling together. Light, white, and black clouds in the firmament. The field of battle became frightful to behold, as if it were the city of the dead. Great car warriors looked upon that scene as if they were spectators of a sport in an arena, beholding no advantage gained by either warrior in that dreadful encounter. They only saw the mingling and clash of their mighty weapons, a result of the evil policy of Dhritarashtra
and his son the two slayers of was continued to cover each other with their keen shafts, filling the welkin with their arrowy downpours. Their gold-decked arrows made the welkin look bright, like blazing meteors. Meanwhile Krishna and Dhananjaya engaged in battle with Karna, thinking the burden too great for Bhima to bear as Karna, and Bhima shot arrows at each other. Many elephants, steeds, and men fell down deprived of life, causing a great carnage in the army of Dhritarashtra.
The sun was setting over the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the warriors, as they clashed in a frenzy of steel and swayed Dhritarashtra. The blind king of Hastinapura sat on his throne, his mind consumed by worry and doubt. He had heard of the prowess of Bhima, the mighty son of Pandu who had defeated Karna. The warrior son of Radha in battle Sanjaya, Dhritarashtra, called out to his charioteer, "Tell me the story of how Bhima and Karna fought each other. I am consumed by curiosity and concern." Sanjaya, a wise and experienced man, began to recount the tale of battle between Bhima and Karna was like nothing anyone had ever seen before. The two warriors were evenly matched, with neither gaining the upper hand for long. They exchanged blows, their arrows flying through the air like deadly birds, striking true time and again. Karna, fueled by rage and determination, shot 30 shafts at Bhima, but the Pandava warrior was unfazed. Bhima retaliated with 3 sharp arrows that cut off Karna's bowstring, rendering him momentarily helpless. Then with a broad-headed arrow he struck down Karna's charioteer, sending him tumbling to the ground. The son of Radha, enraged and humiliated, seized a golden-tipped dart and hurled it at Bhima with all his might. But Bhima was no ordinary warrior. He cut off the dart in midair with 7 swift arrows, each one whetted on stone like Bhima's rod. Karna, undeterred, drew another bow and shot more arrows, but Bhima cut those down too, long as he did so. The two warriors clashed, their bows drawn to the fullest stretch, their arrowy showers scorching each other in a frenzy of steel and swatus. The battle raged on. Karna's chariot was left steedless and driverless, its occupant wounded and helpless. King Duryodhana, enraged by his brother's plight, ordered Durjaya to attack Bhima and drive him back. But Durjaya was no match for the mighty Bhima, who struck down the younger warrior with ease. Karna, weeping in grief, circled around the body of Durjaya. But Bhima was relentless. He covered Karna with arrows, making him look like a set in a spiked chariot that had been pierced by countless spears. And yet, even as he lay wounded and helpless, Karna refused to yield. The battle between Bhima and Karna would be remembered for generations to come, a testament to the bravery and skill of two warriors who had clashed in a frenzy of steel and swate. The sun beat down upon the battlefield as Karna and Bhima clashed once more. Sanjaya watched in awe as the two warriors engaged in a fierce duel, their arrows flying back and forth like a deadly dance. Karna, mounted on his chariot, struck Bhima with showers of shafts, his voice echoing through the air as he let out a mighty roar. But Bhima was not one to be easily defeated. With 10 straight arrows, he pierced Karna's chest and then followed up with 20 more, striking true time and again. The son of Pritha, Karna, retaliated by piercing Bhima in the center of his chest with 9 sharp arrows. But the mighty Bhima was not to be underestimated. Like a driver guiding a mighty elephant with a hook, or a rider whipping a steed into action, Bhima struck back at Karna with 63 arrows, each one biting deep into the sun's armor. Deeply pierced Karna began to lick his lips in rage, his eyes blazing like hot coals in a final desperate bid to turn the tide of battle. Karna, the shaft capable of piercing even Indra's own thunderbolt towards Bhima, but it was too late. The mighty armed Bhima had already prepared himself for this moment. With a fierce cry, he hurled his mass at Karna, striking him with a force that shook the very earth. The sort of sun stumbled, his chariot abandoned and driverless. But still he refused to yield. He drew his bow ready to face Bhima. Once more the battle raged on, each warrior striking true, their arrows flying back and forth like a deadly storm. But as the fight wore on, Karna began to tire. His eyes grew red with rage, and his breath came in hot ragged gasps. Seizing this opportunity, Bhima struck at Karna with 4 and 10 long shafts, each one piercing deep into the sun's armor and drinking his lifeblood. Karna retaliated, but it was too late. He had been wounded, and his strength began to wane. With a final desperate cry, he fled the battlefield, borne away by his fleet steeds. As Bhima stood victorious, his bow still drawn ready for whatever came next, he had Tirtha the Demesna, that great warrior of the Pandavas, stood resplendent on the battlefield like a blazing fire that would not be extinguished. His prowess in battle was unmatched, and all who saw him fight knew that he was a force to be reckoned with. The sun beat Down upon the battlefield is Dhritarashtra, the blind king of Hastinapur, sat upon his throne, his mind consumed by worry and grief. His son Duryodhana had long boasted about the invincibility of Karna, the mighty warrior who had pledged to vanquish the Pandavas in battle. But now, as Dhritarashtra watched from afar, Karna lay defeated on the ground, his armor deaded, and his chariot destroyed by them as relentless onslaught. Dhritarashtra's eyes filled with tears as he recalled Duryodhana's words. Karna is a mighty hero, a firm bowman above all fatigue. If I have that Vasishnath for my Oli, the very gods will not be a match for me. But now it seemed even Karna was no match for Bhima. The old king's thoughts turned to his own son, Duryodhana, who had repeatedly boasted of their ability to vanquish the Pandavas. But as he beheld Karna defeated and lying low, Dhritarashtra knew that his son's boasts were nothing but empty words, as if in confirmation of his fears. Sanjaya, the wise and loyal advisor, appeared before him. "You, O Kaurava, are the root of this destruction," Sanjaya said gently. "Your sons have provoked this fierce hostility, and now they reap the consequences." Dhritarashtra listened as Sanjaya recounted the events of the battle, how 5 of his sons had charged against Bhima, but were swiftly dispatched by the mighty warrior's arrows. How Karna, despite his valiant efforts, was unable to withstand Bhima's ferocity. As Sanjaya spoke, Dhritarashtra watched in horror as his own sons fell one by one. Durmarshana, Dasahad, Durmeda, Durdhara, and Jaya, all of them great bowmen, but no match for the fury of Bhimasna. Their bodies lay strewn across the battlefield, their armor dented, and their charioteers slain. And Karna, the mighty warrior who had once seemed invincible, now looked on in dismay as his brothers fell. The old king's heart was heavy with grief as he realized that his own sons had brought about their own downfall. Duryodhana's boasts were nothing but empty words, and now they would pay the price for their arrogance. As the battle raged on, Dhritarashtra knew that his son's fate was all but sealed. The gods themselves seemed to have turned against him, and Bhima's wrath showed no signs of abating. In the midst of this carnage, Sanjaya's words cut deep into Dhritarashtra's heart. "You, O Kaurava, are the root of this destruction." The old king knew that his son's actions. The sun beat down on the battle-scared landscape as Sanjaya watched in awe. Before him lay the lifeless bodies of Yudhishthira's sons, their youthful vigor extinguished by Karna's unyielding wrath. The Suta's son stood amidst the carnage, his eyes blazing with a mix of fury and despair. Karna and Hira, the son, had never intended for this fate to befall the Pandavas' children. Yet as he beheld their lifeless forms, something within him snapped. He saw himself as guilty, responsible for the slaughter that had taken place before his very eyes. Bhima, the mighty warrior, was the catalyst for Karna's anguish. The latter recalled the past wrongs inflicted by Bhima, and his rage boiled over. Bhimasna, fueled by a desire for vengeance, began to pierce Karna with arrow after arrow. The Suta's son retaliated, smiling as he shot 5 arrows at Bhima, followed by 70 more, each one whetted on stone and equipped with golden wings. Undeterred, Vrikudara continued his assault, piercing Karna in the vitals with 5 keen arrows. A bold move, Bhima cut off Karna's bow with a broad-headed arrow. Karna, enraged, took up another bow and shrouded Bhimasna on all sides with his arrows. But Bhima was not to be underestimated. With the law he slew Karna's steeds and charioteer, then cut down the Suta's son once more. The bow of loud twine adorned with gold fell from Karna's hand as Bhima struck it with his arrows. A mighty warrior, Karna, alighted from his chariot, taking up a mace to hurl at Bhimasna, but the latter resisted its impact with his arrows. And Sanjaya beheld the saint in wonder, the son of Pandu, then shot 1,000 arrows at Karna, seeking to end his life. However, the Suta's son proved resilient, cutting off Bhima's armor with his own arrows. The battle raged on with both warriors exchanging blows. Bhimasna's 9 straight shafts at Karna, piercing through his coat of mail and right arm. The Suta's son turned to flee, but Duryodhana's words urged the others, sons of Pandu, to join the fray. Chitra, Upachitra, Charachitra, Sarasan, Chitrayuta, and Chitravarman rushed towards Bhimasna, but he felled each one with a single arrow. As Karna beheld his brothers slain, tears welled up in his eyes. He recalled Vidur's words and mounted another chariot, proceeding against Bhima. Once more the 2 warriors clashed their arrows, whetted on stone and equipped with golden wings glint.
The sun beat down on the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the chaos. Karna, his eyes blazing like copper, charged forward with a fierce cry at his bow, singing its deadly song as he unleashed arrow after arrow at Bhima. The son of Pandu, the air was filled with the whirring of shafts, each one tipped with peacock feathers and wings of gold, striking true again and again. Undaunted by Karna's fury, he stood firm, his own bow singing its counterpoint as he shot arrow after arrow at his opponent. The two warriors flashed, their bows sprung taut, their eyes locked in a fire stare. The battle raged on the sound of clashing steel and the whirring of arrows, filling the air as Karna continued to pour arrow after arrow into Bhema's body. The son of Pandu began to tire, but he refused to yield his rage and determination. Driving him forward with a mighty roar, he launched himself at Karna, his bow singing its vile notes as he shot 9 arrows in quick succession. Karna stumbled back, his armor dented, and his strength wanting. Bhema pressed his advantage, shooting 20 more arrows that pierced Karna's body like a swarm of deadly insects. The So's son fell, his once proud form now broken and battered as the dust settled. Bhema stood victorious, his chest heaving with exertion. His warriors cheered him on, their voices echoing across the battlefield as they applauded his prowess. But Duryodhana, king of the Kururas, was unmoved by his son's defeat. He rallied his troops, urging them to defend Karna against the son of Pandu. 7 of Duryodhana's brothers rushed forward, their bows singing in unison as they shot arrow after arrow at them. But the son of Pandu stood firm, drawing his bow with a fierce cry and shooting 7 arrows that pierced the chests of his opponents. Like hot coals by one, Duryodhana's brothers fell, their bodies crashing to the ground like trees felled by an elephant. Karna, dear friend of Bhema, was among them, and the son of Pandu grieved for him. But only for a moment. He had vowed to slay his enemies in battle, and he saw it as his duty. As the battle raged on, King Yudhishthira watched from afar, his heart filled with joy at Bhema's victory. But Duryodhana was consumed by grief, his mind racing with memories of past words and deeds that had led to this moment. He knew he was responsible for the destruction of his sons, and he could not bear Vidura, wise counselor to the king, tried to persuade him towards peace. But it was too late. The battle had consumed them all, and now only one.
The sun beat down on the battlefield as King Dhritarashtra sat on his throne, his face etched with worry. He called out to his charioteer Sudha and his advisor Sanjaya, who stood before him. "O Sudha, O Sanjaya," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow, "this terrible outcome that has befallen us is, I fear, a result of my own evil policy. I had thought that what was past was truly gone, but now I see the consequences of my action." Sanjaya bowed his head, his eyes cast downward in respect. "Indeed, O king," he began, "the battle rages on, fueled by your own folly. Karna and Bhema, both mighty warriors, continue to clash with each other like 2 tempests. Unleashed upon the land, their arrows fly through the air, winged with gold and wed on stone, leaving a trail of death. Then their weakest Sanjaya spoke. The king's thoughts turned to his own role in this calamity. He had once thought that what was past was truly gone, but now he saw the error of his ways. "Tell me, Sanjaya," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "what measures can I take now? I am calm, and yet my heart is heavy with grief." Sanjaya's eyes flickered upward as he began to recount the tale of the battle. Karna and Bhema, those 2 titans, continue to pour their arrows into each other like rain-charged clouds, unleashing their fury upon the earth. The arrows shot by Bhema are marked with his name, and they pierce Karna's body like daggers, striking true, and yet Karna retaliates with his own shafts, shooting hundreds and thousands of arrows that wrap around Bhema like a serpent entwining its prey. As Sanjaya spoke, the scene unfolded before the king's mind's eye. He saw the chaos of the battlefield, the cries of the warriors as they fell to the ground, their bodies broken by the relentless onslaught of arrows. The earth itself seemed to tremble beneath his feet, shaken by the sheer force of the battle. A king's thoughts turned to his own army, scattered and fleeing in terror from the wrath of Karna and Bhema. Many were the combatants, Sanjaya said, who fell to their deaths, their bodies broken like reeds crushed beneath the tread of a mighty elephant. The king's heart went out to them, and he felt a pang of sorrow for his own role in this tragedy. The battle raged on. The field itself became a river of blood flowing with the lifeless forms of men and beasts. The earth was strewn with the discarded armor of the warriors, their earrings and necklaces glinting in the sunlight like stars scattered across. The sun beat down on the battlefield as Karna and Bhema clashed in a frenzy of steel and fury. Sanjaya watched with rapt attention as the two warriors exchanged blows, their bows singing with deadly precision. Karna, the Su's son, pierced Bhema with 3 arrows, but the mighty armed Demasa stood firm, his eyes blazing with the fire's inner light. He retaliated by striking Karna in the ear with a barbed arrow, rubbing it with oil and sending it deep into the flesh. The beautiful golden earring that adorned Karna's ear was torn from its moorings, falling to the ground like a star. Plummeting from the Skavama's wrath only grew as he shot 10 long shafts at Karna, their tips glinting with poison and venom. They struck true, piercing Karna's forehead like snakes entering in, until the Su's son looked resplendent, his brow encircled by a chaplet of blue lotuses. But Bhema's arrows had left their mark. Karna's rage was now at its peak as he hurled himself towards Bhema's chariot, his bow singing with deadly precision. He shot 100 shafts winged with vulture and feathers, their tips glinting with gold and fire. The air was filled with the sound of arrows in flight, like a chorus of cranes soaring through the Skavama. However, stood firm, his eyes blazing with fury as he shot back at Karna, showering him with fierce arrows that seemed to darken the very light of the sun. Their bows sang out in perfect harmony, their arrows clashing in midair like 2 great storms meeting head on. The battle raged on, each warrior seeking to outdo the other in a display of strength and prowess. Karna's bow was drawn back to its circle, his arm muscles rippling with power as he shot arrow after arrow into the fray. Bhema's own bow sang out in response, its gold-decked staff flashing like a lightning bolt. Their arrows clashed in midair, producing sparks that seemed to ignite the very sky itself. The air was filled with the sound of their palms slapping against their thighs, the twang of their bowstrings, and the rattle of their chariot wheels. The combatants ceased fighting, awestruck by the display of strength and fury that Karna and Bhema had unleashed upon each other. The celestial Rishisiddhas and Gandharvas watched in awe, applauding the 2 warriors with cries of excellent, excellent. The Vidyadharas rained down flowery showers upon them, their petals dancing in the wind like tiny ballerinas. And yet, despite this display of divine favor, Karna and Bhema continued to exchange blows, their fury unrelenting. In the end, it was Bhema who, the sun had barely risen over the vast expanse of the battlefield when Dhritarashtra's concerns began to gnaw at his heart. He called upon Sanjaya, his trusted charioteer and narrator, to recount the events of the previous day's battles. Sanjaya, my fame is waning, Dhritarashtra said, his voice laced with worry. Many of my warriors have fallen, and I fear that time itself has turned against me. Dhananjaya, fueled by rage, has breached our defenses, protected as they are by the formidable Drona's son, and Karna, united with Krishna and Bhema. His prowess is unmatched. Sanjaya nodded sympathetically, knowing that Dhritarashtra's words were laced with a deep sense of foreboding. Tell me, Sanjaya, Dhritarashtra continued, how did the battle rage on? I have heard of Dhananjaya's entry into our lines, and my heart is consumed by grief like a raging fire devouring. Sanjaya began to recount the tale of Bhema, who had bravely entered the fray, despite being wounded by Karna's arrows. As he spoke, the scene unfolded in vivid detail. Bhema's roars echoing across the battlefield, his formidable bow slicing through our lines like a scythe through wheat. Behold, O King, Sanjaya said, Bhema, that foremost of men, proceeded into the heart of our army, his cart drawn by steeds as white as silver, roaring like the clouds at summer's end and blazing like the autumnal sun. He began to slaughter our warriors with his mighty bow, sending them trembling in his wake. As Sanjaya spoke, the image of Bhema charging forward, his bow singing its deadly song, seemed to come alive before Dhritarashtra's eyes. The king's concerns deepened as he listened to the tale of Alamvasha, the fierce warrior from the land of Sindhu who had dared to challenge Satyakai, the Vrishni herald. 2 warriors clashed in a spectacular display of martial prowess, their bows singing and arrows flying through the air. Sanjaya described how Alamvasha pierced Satyakai with 10 arrows, but the grandson of Sinite simply cut them down with his own shafts before they could reach him. As the battle raged on, Dhritarashtra's anxiety grew. He knew that his warriors were no match for Dhananjaya, and his Ally Sanjaya continued to recount the tale, describing how Satyakai slew Alamvasha's steeds with 4 swift arrows, and then cut off the king's head with a broad-headed arrow. The image of Satyakai, that mighty warrior, riding forth into battle, his bow singing its deadly song, seemed to sear itself into Dhritarashtra's. The sun beat down upon the battlefield as Sanjaya watched in awe. The Trigards, their golden standards held high, had encircled Satyakai, the mighty warrior from the Shurasas. Like a tempest, he had charged into the heart of the Kaurava army, his movements swift and unyielding. As Sanjaya Described that Satyaki was like a lion's playful tread, as he danced across the battlefield, vanquishing foe after foe with ease. The trigger warriors, their faces twisted in rage, were no match for him. They fled before him like leaves blown by a gust of wind. But Satyaki's journey did not end there. He pressed on, his armor battered and weary, but his spirit unbroken. He had fought his way through the Kalingas, crossing their division as if it were a mere obstacle, and now he approached the presence of Dhananjaya. The son of Pritha. Satyaki drew near. Kesava, the divine Krishna, spoke up, his voice filled with admiration for the brave warrior. Behold, Partha, he exclaimed, Udhana comes towards you. Following in your wake, he is the disciple and friend of Bull among men, who has vanquished all who dare oppose him. But Dhananjaya's expression was not one of joy. His brow furrowed with concern. He spoke to Kesava in hushed tones. This Satyaki should have protected the king, he said, his voice heavy with doubt. Why has he left Yudhishthira behind and followed me instead? The king is now at the mercy of Drona. Seva listened attentively as Dhananjaya's words poured out like a river. He spoke of Jadra, the still unslain, and Burasrava's approaching Satyaki in battle. And was Satyaki himself? He asked, his voice tinged with worry. He is tired, his weapons exhausted, and his steeds weary. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the battlefield. Dhananjaya's words were laced with uncertainty as he pondered the fate of his friend and warrior. Would Satyaki emerge victorious against Burasravas, or would he succumb to the skilled Kurukshetra warrior? Only time would tell. The sun beat down upon the battlefield as Burasravas, a warrior from the Kuru clan, gazed at Satyaki, the grandson of Sinai. His eyes blazed with rage and pride as he beheld the invincible fighter approaching him. By luck it is you who have come within my sight today, Burasravas declared, his voice like thunder. Today in this battle I shall fulfill a long-held desire. If you do not flee from battle, you will not escape me with your life. Satyaki, known as Udhana, laughed at Burasravas' words. His eyes sparkled with amusement as he replied, I am never inspired by fear. In battle you will not terrify me with your words alone. He stood tall, his broad chest and long arms a testament to his strength. He who can disarm me in battle will be the one to slay me. What is the use of idle boasts? Accomplish what you say, for your words are as fruitless as autumnal clouds. The two warriors, each eager to prove their prowess, charged at each other with a fierce cry. Their bows sang out as they unleashed a torrent of arrows upon one another. The air was filled with the whizzing sounds of shafts and darts, like two tigers fighting with their claws, or two elephants with their tusks. They mangled each other's limbs, and blood flowed from their wounds as the battle raged on. The two warriors engaged in a wrestling match, their arms locked in a fire struggle. Their skill was evident as they exchanged blows, their movements swift and agile. The sounds of clashing armor and grunting efforts filled the air like thunder crashing upon a mountain. Braced the orchestras watched with joy as these two illustrious warriors clashed, their hearts filled with pride at the prowess displayed by Burasravas and Satyaki. They fought like two leaders of elephantine herds, each determined to emerge victorious. As their weapons were exhausted, Vasudeva, the divine warrior, approached Arjuna and said, Behold, that foremost of all bowmen, Satyaki, is engaged in battle, his chariot lost. He has entered the Bharat, host following your path. O son of Pandu, a battle between Burasravas and Satyaki was a spectacle to behold. Two warriors of great might, each determined to prove their strength. Their movements were swift and agile, like two bulls with their horns locked in combat. They bound each other with their arms, struck each other with their heads, intertwined their legs, slapped their armpits, pinched each other with their nails, clasped each other tightly, twined their legs around each other's loins, rolled on the ground, advanced, wristed, and leaped up. The sun beat down upon the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the clash of steel on steel. The war raged on its fury, unrelenting in the midst of this chaos. A moment of truth emerged. Sanjaya watched in sorrow as Burasravas' arm fell to the ground, severed from his body by Arjuna's unseen sword. The Kuru warrior's eyes widened in shock and pain, his gaze fixed on the limb that had been torn away. His armor, once proud and strong, now lay limp and still. Burasravas' voice rose above the din of battle, a cry of accusation and anger. You have done a cruel deed, O son of Kunti, he shouted at Arjuna. You cut off my arm without engaging with me in combat. What right do you have to such actions? Were you taught by Indra or Rudra themselves? Arjuna stood firm, his eyes locked on the fallen warrior. He knew the rules of battle, and he had acted according to them. But Burasravas would not be swayed. You are a Kshatriya, He spat you should know better than to strike down and unarmed, for Sanjaya watched as Arjuna's patience worth and the young warrior's words grew sharper, his tone more defensive. I protected Satyaki, my friend, and teacher from your deadly blow. You would have killed him without a second thought had I not intervened, and now you rebuke me. For saving his life, Purushrava's anger only intensified, as he spoke of the Vrishas and the Anadekas, their behavior a stain on the honor of Kshatriyas. Everywhere Arjuna's response was laced with sorrow and regret. You are blind to your own faults. Purushravas, you see only the actions of others. The two warriors stood there locked in a silent chill, and Sanjaya watched as Purushravas' anger gave way to a deep sadness. The warrior's eyes dropped, his gaze fixed on the ground. He knew that his time was drawing to a close in a final desperate bid for honor. Purushravas spread out a bit of a rose with his left hand and committed himself to the care of the gods. His heart set on the moon. He closed his eyes and began to chant the mantras of the Upanishads. The battle raged on around him, but Purushravas was lost in a world of his own. He felt no joy at the praise of his comrades, only sorrow for the life that had been cut short. Arjuna's words still echoed in his mind, remembering, your vow behooves you not to censure me. Purushravas' silence was a testament to the weight of. The sun was setting over the vast expanse of the Kaurava army, and Dhritarashtra, the blind king, sat on his throne, pondering the events of the day. His advisor Sanjaya stood before him, a look of concern etched on his face. Your Majesty, Sanjaya began, you have asked how Satyaki, that unvanquished hero from the Vrishya clan, could be defeated by Purushravas, a warrior from the Kuru family. I shall tell you the story of how this came to pass. Sanjaya's words transported Dhritarashtra back in time to an era long past. He spoke of Atreya, a great sage who had a son named Sama. Sama's own son was Vata, and Vata's son was Kauravas, a king renowned for his splendor. Kauravas' son was Ayas, a mighty ruler in his own right. Ayas had a son named Nahusha, who was said to be equal to the gods in wisdom and power. Nahusha's son was Yetai, a royal sage with unparalleled virtue. Yeatai's eldest son was Yedu, from whom would spring a great lineage of heroism. Among them was Devamita, a warrior whose name echoed through the three worlds. His son, Shura, was renowned for his bravery and prowess in battle, and it was Shura who sired Vasudeva, the greatest of all men, unmatched in archery or combat. Vasudeva's ancestors had been kings, their fame spreading far and wide. Sanjaya continued, in those days a great Swayambara took place, where the beautiful Devaki, daughter of King Devaka, was to choose her husband from among the assembled Kshatriyas. All eyes were on Vasudeva's family, for it was said that he would be the chosen one. As Sanjaya spoke, the scene unfolded before Dhritarashtra's mind's eye. Sinai, a mighty warrior and Vasudeva's ancestor, had indeed won Devaka's hand in marriage, vanquishing all other suitors in the process. But not everyone was pleased with this outcome. Sonadatta, a powerful king from another clan, could not bear to see his rival Sinai triumph. A fierce battle ensued between the two, their strength and skill matched only by their pride. For half a day the combat raged on, with thousands of kings watching in awe. In the end it was Somadatta who fell before Sinai's superior might. Defeated, he begged for mercy, and Sinai spared his life, saying, live. However, Somadatta's anger and pride would not be easily assuaged. He began to worship Mahadeva the Great. As the sun beat down on the battlefield, Dhritarashtra's curiosity got the better of him. After Purushravas had fallen, he asked Sanjaya, tell me, O Sanjaya, how did the battle proceed? Sanjaya began to recount the events that unfolded after the mighty warrior Purushravas had been slain. Arjuna, determined to fulfill his vow and slay Jayadratha before sunset, urged Krishna to urge their steeds forward with greater speed. We must reach Jayadratha before the sun sets. Arjuna exclaimed, his eyes blazing with determination. Krishna, conversant with horse lore, urged the steeds on, and they galloped towards Jayadratha's chariot. But as they approached, a large army of Kuru warriors, led by Duryodhana, Karna, Vrishesna, and the ruler of the Saindus himself, rushed to intercept Arjuna. Karna, addressing his son Sayadhana, urged him to fight with all his might to protect Jayadratha. If we can keep Jayadratha safe until sunset, he said, Arjuna's vow will be broken and he will enter the blazing fire of defeat. Duryodhana echoed Karna's words, urging his son to act swiftly and strike down Arjuna with a hail of arrows. But Arjuna was undaunted. With his keen arrows he began to slaughter Jayadratha's host, cutting off arms, heads, and trunks of elephants as if they were dry grass. Before a blazing fire the earth was soon covered in blood, and the mighty Partha, with Krishna by his side, seemed invincible. The sun dipped lower in the sky, its red hue casting a fire spell over the battlefield. Jayadratha's warriors grew more desperate. They surrounded Arjuna, on all sides determined to slay him and protect their king. But Arjuna was not one to be easily defeated. With his invincible bow he cut down shaft after shaft, piercing his enemies like a scorching flame. Swathaman, bearing the mark of a lion's tail on his banner, began to resist Arjuna. But even he could not withstand the diadem-decked warrior's might. The battle raged on, with countless arrows flying through the air, and the earth shaking beneath the feet of the warriors. The sun finally set over the Estate hills, casting a golden glow over the battlefield. The Kuru warriors stood victorious, but at great cost. Jayadratha was still alive, but Arjuna had fulfilled his vow, and the battle would be remembered for generations to come as one of the greatest in history. The sun was setting over the vast expanse of the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the assembled armies of the Kurus, and the Panchala. Sanjaya, the charioteer of King Dhritarashtra, stood on the chariot's platform, his eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before him. As Arjuna, son of Pritha, began to prepare for battle, his bow stringed white with a sound that echoed through the air like the peal of Indra's thunder. The enemy army trembled with fear as they beheld the mighty warrior Ananjaya stretching his Gandavat bow and preparing to unleash its deadly force. The son of Pandu was a whirlwind on the battlefield, his arrows flying forth from his quiver with such rapidity that it seemed impossible to track their flight. His chariot carried across the field, scattering enemy warriors like autumn leaves before an autumn gale. The air was filled with the sound of clashing steel and the cries of the fallenest. Arjuna shafts rained down upon the enemy. They resembled a river in full spate, overflowing its banks and carrying all before it. The battlefield became a sea of blood and gore, strewn with the bodies of elephants, horses, and men. The cries of the wounded and the dying filled the air, mingling with the sound of drums and conches. Sanjaya watched as Arjuna's prowess seemed to grow by the minute, his arrows striking their mark with unerring accuracy. The son of Pandu was a force of nature, unstoppable and merciless in his pursuit of victory. His chariot seemed to dance across the battlefield, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. As the battle raged on, Arjuna's sights were set on Jayadratha, the Kaurava prince who had slain his brother Abhimanyu with 64 straight arrows. He pierced Jayadratha through, bringing an end to the young warrior's life. The Kuru army, witnessing this feat of arms, was filled with despair and hopelessness as night began to fall. Sanjaya, dazed upon the carnage before him, his heart heavy with grief and sorrow. The battlefield was a charnel house strewn with the bodies of the fallen. The cries of the wounded still echoed through the air, mingling with the sound of drums and conches. Amidst of this chaos, Arjuna stood tall, his visage radiant with a fierce light, like that of the destroyer himself. His bowstring still vibrated with the force of his arrows, as if echoing the very heartbeat of the universe. The son of Pandu had unleashed a maelstrom upon the battlefield, and none could stand against him. The sun was setting over the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the carnage that had unfolded before Dhritarashtra's eyes. His son Duryodhana lay defeated, his body broken by Arjuna's unyielding determination. The old king's heart was heavy with grief and regret as he turned to Sanjaya, his charioteer and confidant. "Tell me, O Sanjaya," Dhritarashtra said, his voice trembling with emotion, "what did my warriors you after the heroic ruler of the Saindas had been slain by Arjuna?" Sanjaya's eyes fell upon the ground as he began to recount the events that had transpired. "Beholding the ruler of the Saindas, O sire, slain in battle by Partha," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Kripa, the son of Saradwat, under the influence of wrath, covered the son of Pandu with a dead shower of arrows. The scene unfolded like a dark and foreboding storm. Kripa's arrows rained down upon Arjuna, but the young warrior refused to yield. He countered each shot with precision and skill, his own arrows flying true and swift. The battle raged on, with neither side giving quarter. Sanjaya spoke. Dhritarashtra's eyes grew wide with horror. His warriors were being cut down one by one, their bodies broken and battered by Arjuna's unyielding onslaught. And yet, despite the carnage that surrounded him, Arjuna seemed to be in a state of deep distress. "Why does he layman?" So Dhritarashtra asked, his voice tinged with confusion. "He has won the battle after all." Sanjaya's eyes fell upon Arjuna once more as he spoke. "Beholding all this, O king," he said, "Vidyur of great wisdom had on the birth of the wretch Sayadhana, the exterminator of his race, said unto Dhritarashtra, 'Let this wretch of his race be soon killed, owing to him a great calamity will overtake the foremost ones of Kura's race. Dhritarashtra's eyes widened in understanding as he listened to Sanjaya's words. He realized that Arjuna was not just fighting for victory. He was fighting against his own guilt and regret as the battle raged on. Another figure emerged out of the same Karna. The son of Radha, his massive form towered over the battlefield, his eyes blazing with fury as he beheld Purusravis lifeless. Bhati Satyakai, the grandson of Sinai, stood ready to face him, his own car prepared for battle. Krishna, Arjuna's charioteer and friend, blew a mighty conch shell, its sound echoing. The sun beat down upon the battlefield as the war between the Pandavas and the Kauravas raged on. Dhritarashtra, the blind king of Hastinapura, gazed out at the carnage before him, his mind consumed by worry for his son Duryodhana Sanjaya. He called out to his charioteer, "Tell me what Bhima did in this battle when our side was struggling against those brave warriors." Sanjaya bowed his head and began to speak. After Bhimasna had been defeated by Karna's arrows, that hair filled with rage and wounded pride turned to falcon of Arjuna and said, "In your very sight, Dhananjaya, Karna has repeatedly called me a eunuch, a fool, a glutton unskilled in weapons. He who would tell me so would be slain by me." Arjuna's eyes flashed with anger as he listened to Bhima's words. "I will not let this insult go unpunished," he vowed. "Karna, you are a coward and a fool. You boast of your own prowess, but in battle you are nothing but a weakling." Sanjaya continued. Bhima reminded Arjuna of the vow they had made to each other to fight for what was right and just. "Remember our promise, Dhananjaya," he said. "We must not falter." Now Arjuna's determination grew as he gazed out at the battlefield. He saw Karna, his enemy, taunting them with cruel words. "You are a eunuch, a fool," Karna had said. "Why do you even fight?" But Arjuna knew that these insults were not just mere words. They were a challenge to his honor, to his very identity. As a warrior, he drew his bow and aimed it at Karna's heart. "You may boast of your own prowess," he said, "but I will show you what true bravery looks like." As Arjuna shot his arrow, the battlefield erupted into chaos. The sound of clashing steel, the screams of the wounded, and the cries of the dying filled the air. Sanjaya watched in awe as Arjuna fought on, his arrows flying through the air with deadly precision. Krishna, the divine charioteer, rode alongside Arjuna, guiding him through the chaos. "You have accomplished your vow," he said, smelling softly. "Vriddachitra and his son are dead." But Krishna's words were not just a simple statement of fact. They were a reminder to Arjuna that this war was not just about winning or losing. It was about living up to one's own ideals, about fighting for what was right. As they rode through the battlefield, Krishna pointed out that the sun was setting over the battlefield, casting a warm orange glow over the assembled warriors. Sanjaya, the narrator, spoke of the events that had transpired earlier in the day. After the ruler of the sign thus had been slain by Partha, he began. Krishna, repairing unto the king, viz. Yudhishthira, the son of Dharma, worshipped the latter with a gladdened heart. As Sanjaya spoke, Krishna approached Yudhishthira's chariot, his eyes shining with joy and gratitude. "By good luck, O King of Kings," he said, "thee prosperity increaseth, O best of men, thy foe hath been slain." Yudhishthira's face lit up with happiness as he listened to Krishna's words. Krishna continued, "By good luck, your younger brother has accomplished his vow." He spoke of the bravery and skill displayed by Arjuna in battle and how it had brought glory to their family. Yudhishthira's eyes filled with tears of joy as he heard his friend's praises. Krishna finished speaking. Yudhishthira leaped from his chariot, his face radiant with happiness. He rushed towards the two Krishnas, Arjuna and Krishna, and enveloped them in a warm embrace, wiping away tears of joy from his eyes. He said, "Ye mighty car warriors, by good luck I'd behold both of you after ye have accomplished your task." Yudhishthira's words were met with cheers and applause from the assembled warriors. Bhima, the mighty warrior, and Satyakai, another skilled fighter, approached their senior, their faces mangled, but their spirits unbroken. They saluted Yudhishthira with joined hands, grateful for his praise. Yudhishthira's words of appreciation continued to flow like a river. "By good luck it is that I see you both, ye heroes, escaped with life from that sea of hostile troops. By good luck all the kings of the earth have been vanquished by you too." He spoke of their bravery and skill in battle and how they had brought glory to their families. Yudhishthira finished speaking. He rushed towards Bhima and Satyakai, embracing them warmly. Tears of joy streamed down his face as he held the two warriors close. The entire host of the Pandavas erupted into cheers and applause, their spirits Lifted by Yudhishthira's words in this moment of triumph, the Pandavas knew that they were invincible, that with Krishna on their side, nothing was impossible. They set their hearts on battle once more, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The sun had set on a day that would forever be etched in the memories of the Kauravas, and Pandavas like Sanjaya stood before King Dhritarashtra, his voice heavy with sorrow as he recounted the tale of the fallen ruler of the Sindhus, the king's son. Suddhodana sat before him, his face a mask of grief, his eyes red-rimmed from tears. Suddhodana's thoughts were consumed by the weight of defeat. His army, once so mighty and proud, had been decimated by the Pandavas. He remembered the words of Karna, who had boasted that he would single-handedly vanquish Arjuna. But now even Karna lay defeated, his energy broken like a snake whose fangs have been shattered. Suddhodana spoke to himself, his voice rose in anguish. What is there left for me? My allies, my friends, all gone to Yamazabad. Jayadratha, the mighty warrior who had sworn to protect me, lies slain by Arjuna's hand. And Karna, oh Karna, how could you fail us? His words trailed off as he gazed out at the devastation. Before him Sanjaya watched as Suddhodana rose from his seat, his eyes blazing with a mix of anger and despair. He strode towards Drona's quarters, seeking the guidance of his preceptor. Behold, O Drona, Suddhodana said, his voice heavy with emotion, this is the aftermath of our battle. My grandfather Bhishma lies fallen, his aspiration fulfilled by Sikandin and my allies. So many have gone to Yamazabad. Drona listened as Suddhodana recounted the tale of their defeat. The young prince's words were laced with self-loathing and regret. I am a coward, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I have caused such slaughter among my friends. How can I be sanctified by performing even 100 horse sacrifices? His eyes flashed towards Drona, as if seeking absolutionists. The sun dipped below the horizon. Suddhodana's words grew more fervent. He spoke of his desire to free himself from the debt he owed to those who had fallen in battle. I shall go to the Yamuna, he said, his voice resolute. There I shall perform oblations to them and seek their forgiveness. His eyes locked onto Drona's as if seeking permission for this final act of devotion. In that moment Sanjaya saw a glimmer of what lay within Suddhodana's heart, the deep sense of guilt and sorrow mixed with a desperate desire for redemption. The young prince's words were those of a man torn apart by his own actions. The sun beat down on the battlefield as King Duryodhana's rage grew with each passing moment. His eyes blazed with fury as he summoned Karna, his trusted charioteer and warrior. Behold, Karna, Duryodhana exclaimed, his voice trembling with emotion. Our enemy Arjuna has pierced the impenetrable array formed by our preceptor Drona. He has slain Jayadratha, the ruler of the Sindhus, in a battle that saw many of our bravest warriors. Falconer's expression turned somber as he listened to Duryodhana's words. But my king, he said gently, do not blame Drona for this defeat. He fights with all his might and valor regardless of his own life. Karna's voice rose in defense of their preceptor. Arjuna is a skilled warrior armed with celestial weapons and mounted on an bannered car. He has the power to transgress even the greatest warriors. Duryodhana shook his head, his anger boiling over once more. But how could Arjuna have achieved this feat without Drona's permission? He demanded. And what of Jayadratha, who had begged for protection and was denied it? I had promised him safe passage, but you, Karna, prevented him from leaving. Karna's face fell as he remembered the events that had led to Jayadratha's downfall. I did not mean to cause harm, my king, he said softly, but perhaps fate has ordained this outcome. We have fought with all our might, using both deceit and prowess against the Pandavas. Yet despite our best efforts, we have been unable to defeat them. As Karna spoke, a fierce battle erupted on the horizon as the Pandava divisions clashed with Duryodhana's forces. Cars and elephants thundered across the battlefield, their riders fighting for victory or survival. The sound of clashing steel echoed through the air, mingling with the cries of the wounded, and the dying Sanjaya watched the chaos unfold, his voice rising in a lamentation that seemed to echo the king's own despair. All this, O king, he said, is due to your evil policy. You have brought ruin upon yourself and your people, blinded by your hatred for the Pandavas. The battle raged on, its outcome hanging precariously in the balance as the warriors clashed in a struggle that would decide the fate of kingdoms and empires. The sun beat down upon the battlefield, casting long shadows across the dusty earth. The air was thick with the scent of sweat and blood as the armies clashed in a frenzy of steel and fury. Sanjaya, advisor to King Dhritarashtra, stood on a hill overlooking the chaos, his voice carrying above the din as he recounted the battles unfolding. The elephant force of yours, O King Sanjaya, began, swelled with might, fought everywhere, prevailing over the Pandava, force the Panchalas and Kauravas had become so embroiled in combat that they forgot their differences, fighting for a place among the dead. Warriors pierced one another with arrows and lances, sending each other tumbling to the ground. Infuriated elephants clashed with their comrades, their tusks flashing in the sunlight as they rent the air with trumpeting cries. Horsemen galloped across the battlefield, spears and darts glinting in the fading light of day. Foot soldiers rushed forward, armed with 1,000 different types of weapons, each one seeking to prove his worth. The battle raged on, fueled by rage and desperation. Duryodhana, son of King Dhritarashtra, led the charge into the heart of the Pandava army. His chariot wheels rattled across the earth, causing it to tremble beneath him as he sought to claim victory. For the Kauravas, as night began to fall, the 10 points on the horizon disappeared from view, lost in a sea of rose and darkness. The sun's rays had set, but Duryodhana's fury only grew. He unleashed his gold-winged arrows, blazing with fierce intensity, cutting down Panchala warriors left and right. The Pandavas stumbled backward, their ranks broken by the sheer ferocity of Duryodhana's attack. They faltered, unable to withstand the onslaught, as the Kaurava prince seemed invincible. Bhima, son of Pandu, hurled 10 shafts into the fray, but even his mighty strength was no match for Duryodhana's unyielding mightiness. The battle reached its climax. Yudhishthira, eldest son of Pandu, stood tall amidst the carnage, his eyes locked onto Duryodhana as he loosed a pair of broad-headed shafts that severed the Kaurava prince bow into 3 pieces. The Panchala troops cheered as Yudhishthira aimed another arrow at their enemy, but just as victory seemed within their grasp, Drona, preceptor to the Kauravas, appeared on the battlefield. With a swift motion, he turned aside the Pandava host and shielded his prince from harm. The battle raged on, with neither side giving quarter, in a struggle that would decide the fate of the war. As night deepened, the sounds of clashing steel and screams. The sun had set over the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the armies of the Kauravas, and the Pandavas. King Dhritarashtra's voice echoed through the air as he asked his charioteer Sanjaya to recount the events of the day. Tell me, Sanjaya, Dhritarashtra said, how did my son Duryodhana fare against the mighty Baal and Drona? When Drona, with his wrath burning like a raging fire, charged into the Pandava host, how did they resist him? Sanjaya's voice trembled as he began to recount the tale. As you know, O king, after slaying the ruler of the Saindhas, Partha and Sayak, I met with Yudhishthira and proceeded towards Drona. Then each of the Pandavas, led by their respective divisions, rushed against Drona in battle. The night air was filled with the sound of drums beating out a fierce rhythm as the armies clashed. The darkness seemed to come alive with the snarling of jackals and the hooting of wolves perched on the standards of the Kauravas. As Sanjaya continued his tale, the sounds of clashing weapons echoed through the night air, mingling with the screams of men and beasts. The earth shook beneath our feet as the armies collided. Sanjaya said, his voice barely above a whisper. Friends and foes were indistinguishable in the darkness, and all was chaos. But even as the battle raged on, there was a moment of respite, when the golden coats of mail and ornaments of the warriors caught the moonlight, dispelling the darkness. For a brief instant, the battlefield became a maelstrom of sound and fury, with elephants and cars crashing against each other, swords and darts flashing in the dim light. Duryodhana was at the forefront of this tempest, like host, his presence like a gust of wind that heralded the storm to come. Cars and elephants thundered across the battlefield, their gold-plated armor glinting in the moonlight as they charged forward. The sound of drums and cymbals mingled with the screams of men and beasts, creating a cacophony that was both terrifying and exhilarating. As Sanjaya finished his tale, Dhritarashtra's eyes grew wide with wonder. Tell me, Sanjaya, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, what happened to Drona in the midst of all this chaos? Sanjaya's expression turned somber as he replied, Drona alone pierced through the darkness, striking down elephants and cars by the thousands and sending millions of foot soldiers and steeds to their deaths. The night air seemed to grow quieter, as if the very presence of Drona had brought a stillness to the battlefield. It was a dark and foreboding night, the kind that made even the bravest of warriors tremble with fear. The armies of the Kauravas and the Panchalas had clashed in a frenzy of steel and blood, each side fighting for its very survival in the midst of this chaos. Dhritarashtra, the blind king of the Kuras, sat upon his throne seeking solace in the words of his charioteer Sanjaya. What did you think when Drona, that invincible warrior, entered the fray? Dhritarashtra asked, his voice laced with worry. When he slew Jayadratha and Yurasravas, what steps did Arjuna take, and what of my son Duryodhana? What was his plan in all this? Sanjaya, that wise and aged charioteer, began to recount the tale of that fateful night as the battle raged on. He said, the Pandavas, led by Arjuna, charged into the midst of Drona's army like a stormy wind. But Drona was no ordinary warrior. With his swift-shafted arrows and immeasurable energy, he cut down king after king, sending them to their eternal rest. As Sanjaya spoke, the scene unfolded before us like a dark tapestry. We saw Sivai, that great car warrior of the Panchalas, charging into battle against Drona. The two warriors clashed in a flurry of steel and feathers, each one striking down the other's companions with deadly precision. But Drona was not to be defeated so easily. With 10 iron-tipped arrows, he pierced Sivai through his armor and sent him tumbling to the ground. Then with a single broad-headed shaft, he felled Sivai's driver and steeds, cutting off the warrior's head from its trunk. And yet, even as Drona seemed invincible, Dema, that mighty son of Pandu, emerged onto the scene. Like a lion, unleashed with his fists flying in all directions, he slew Durmada and Dushkarna, two brave warriors of the Kuras, sending them crashing to the earth. As Sanjaya recounted the tale, we saw the armies of the Kuras and the Panchalas locked in a desperate struggle for survival. We saw Karna, that mighty warrior, hurling darts at Bhima with all his might. We saw Sekanai, that cunning old man, cutting off Bhima's dart with a shaft dipped in oil. But most of all, we saw Bhima himself, led great and terrible hero, feared by all who knew him, with eyes beautiful as the full-blown lotus. He strode through the battle like a god among men, his fists crushing his enemies beneath their weight. As the night wore on, in the midst of the great war, a fierce battle unfolded between the Kauravas and the Pandavas. Sodata, filled with rage at the death of his son Yurasravas, hurled insults at Satyaki, calling him a coward for killing an unarmed warrior. He vowed to cut off Satyaka's head with a winged arrow if he didn't slay him in battle. Satyaki, unfazed by Somadata's words, retorted that he was not afraid of the Kaurava warrior. He boasted of his own strength and bravery and threatened to strike down Somadata with all his might. The two warriors began to exchange arrows, their shafts flying back and forth like a stormy tempest. As the battle raged on, Duryodhana took his station behind Somadata, surrounded by his troops and family members. His brother-in-law Shekanai also joined the fray, armed with every weapon imaginable. The Kaurava army was a formidable force, but Satyaki stood firm, his eyes fixed intently on Somadata. The sound of clashing steel echoed through the battlefield as the two armies clashed. Somadata pierced Satyaki with 9 arrows, but the Pandava warrior retaliated with equal force, striking down the Kaurava warrior with 9 arrows of his own. Somadata's strength began to wind, and he sat down on the terrace of his chariot, overcome by a soul. As Somadata was borne away from the battlefield, Drona rushed forward to slay Satyaki, but the Pandavas rallied around their fallen comrade, surrounding Drona with a fierce determination. The battle between Drona and the Pandavas raged on, with arrows flying back and forth like a storm. Drola's prowess was unmatched, his shafts cutting down any warrior who dared to approach him. But Arjuna, fueled by his wrath, charged forward towards the preceptor, determined to put an end to his slaughter of the Pandavas. The battle between Drona and the Pandavas continued, with neither side giving quarter. As the night wore on, the Pandava host began to falter under Drola's onslaught. But just as all seemed lost, Arjuna and Bhima charged forward towards Drona's division, their chariots thundering across the battlefield. The Kauravas and their allies followed close behind, determined to crush the Pandavas once and for all. The battle that ends, it was a maelstrom of clashing steel and screams of the fallen. Arjuna and Bhima fought with all their might, their arrows flying true as they struck down warrior after warrior. The Kaurava army wavered under the onslaught, but Drona remained steadfast, his bow singing as he fired arrow after arrow. The sun beat down upon the battlefield as Sanjaya watched the clash of Titans unfold before him. Thousands of warriors had already fallen at the hands of Arjuna's mighty sword and Bhima's powerful arrows. The sons of Drupada, Kuntiboja, and Rakshasis were among those who had met their end. The battle reached on Samadatta. A fierce warrior covered Satyaki with a dense shower of arrows. But Bhima was not to be underestimated. He pierced Katirava, a harrow with 10 swift shafts, while Samadatta retaliated with 100 arrows. The duel between these two warriors was a spectacle to behold. Setwata, filled with rage, charged at Samadatta, piercing him with 10 keen shafts. Bhima then hurled a paraya, a new and terrible mass, at the fallen warrior's head.